Great, thank you, Howard. So can everyone see a screen share up in front of them, and is the text big enough? You should be able to zoom in a bit yourselves, but I can always expand it a bit if it's no good.
Looks good for me, thank you.
Brilliant, okay, well, diolch Howard and everyone for joining. So good afternoon, everyone. So this is our first show and tell for a while as we enter the extended alpha phase of the project. So what we wanted to do today is I'll give a very brief project update and an introduction to some new faces. We'll have an update from Warren on the procurement journey development and what's happening in terms of the key service iteration. And then Corey will talk to us a bit about user testing and engagement, what's happening in that space. We'll have an opportunity for questions at the end, but please feel free to put up your hand or add questions in the chat as we go along, if that's preferred. And then at the end, hopefully I'll remember to mention the key Granny sessions that are coming up. Does that sound all right with everyone? Great, so I should probably introduce myself properly. I will have met some of you before, but I'm James Taylor, delivery lead at Parago, and I was involved in the key project back when it started last year in terms of the initiation phase, and then Ross was kind of moving that forward. So now I'm back in the delivery seat and trying to move things forward with Keyed, and it's been really interesting. So it's good to be back. Also on the call, we've got some friends from UBDS. So I think we've got John, Jack and Katja. You want to give a little wave?
Hello.
So thank you for joining this session. So UBDS are part of delivering some of the initiatives within the digital action plan, and specifically, I think one of the asks we wanted to make today is around supporting them with a policy mapping tool and actually how we integrate our work and the work of Keyed with the wider e-procurement and digital tools that are currently in development, because we don't want to be coming to you to ask the same questions or overwhelm anyone, and things need to be coordinated. So the intention is to try and bring some of these strands together, and there'll be a bit more of an update on that as the presentation progresses. Any immediate questions before I just talk a bit about what the scope of this extended alpha is? So in terms of the extended alpha, it's a 3-month development which started last month. It's continued into this month and June, and really it's about picking up where we left off with Keyed and the initial alpha. So I don't know how many people will have seen Dave's blog that kind of gave a good summary of where we got to, but we wanted to progress this extended alpha to make sure that we get more feedback from the community as we've done before, to provide a further opportunity to evaluate success of Keyed and what the future plans may be. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment, and our attention is focused mainly on how can we shift to a version 2 of the website, which will have extended features and content, and what does it mean to kind of link in with some of these other initiatives as I've already described. So I wasn't really going to say anything much more than that, but again, anyone have any immediate questions just now? So I forgot I had the slide actually. So the work streams, just for information, is develop the ongoing governance and operating model for Keyed. So this is about how does Keyed progress within the community, and what kind of governance needs to be put around it to make sure it's successful. How does it operate? It's about iterating the service that we've talked about in terms of Keyed and its features. Integrating with other priority areas, which I mentioned there, and continuing to work in the open, which includes obviously these show and tell sessions and the key grannies and our kind of user engagement and testing. So now I think I've covered everything, and it's probably a good opportunity to hand over to Warren to give us an update on the procurement journey.
Thank you, James. Nice to see you all again. Some familiar and new faces, which is always nice. So yeah, as James mentioned, I'll be talking about the procurement journey. And so if you can go on to the next slide, please, James. I think you're driving, aren't you? Yeah, thank you. So earlier this month, we received the materials that have been produced by the Welsh Government so far in relation to the procurement journey. And that's based on, largely based on what the Scottish Government has done, which has been published on their website for some time now. And so just on behalf of all the key team, we're extremely grateful to all the people who've worked hard on creating this content, which means a very good amount of the heavy lifting has actually already been done. So we're really grateful for that. And this content includes 76 documents in total, and that's 38 in Welsh language and 38 in English, representing 6 of the 9 steps that make up the end-to-end procurement journey. And for the time being, we're using the legacy labeling of routes. That may change, of which there are 3, and I'll come back to this in the next slide. And all of this content is being systematically added to the Phase 2 Key website, which is currently being tested. And my colleague Corey will talk about that next, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. So next slide, please, James. Thanks. So as I just mentioned, Scottish Government's procurement journey is what's being used to structure the content for the Phase 2 Key website. And for the time being, we're using the legacy labelling of routes. Route 1, for those who perhaps may not be aware of this, is for procurements that would result in contracts with a total estimated value under £25,000, including VAT, which are classed as non-repetitive and considered low risk. Route 2 is for procurements resulting in contracts with a total estimated value between £25,000 and the thresholds that are set by the World Trade Organization Agreement on Government Procurement, the WTO GPA. And Route 3 is for procurements that would result in contracts with a total estimated value that's equal to or above the WTO GPA thresholds. So in addition to the routes, the procurement journey is broken down into 3 stages: develop at the pre-procurement stage, tender at the procurement stage, and contract at the post-procurement stage. And so together, these stages represent the full commercial life cycle. The numbers shown here in this slide are the quantity of documents that we received that relate to each of the 3 stages and each of the 3 routes. And so there are a total of 16 documents, so 8 in Welsh and 8 in English for Route 1, and 60 documents, 30 in Welsh, 30 in English for Route 2, so totaling 76 documents currently. As Route 3 is expected to be largely influenced by the changes resulting from procurement reform, we'll focus on this content at a later stage and in collaboration with our colleagues in Welsh Government, Carl Thomas and Sue Hurrell, who are leading on this area. Next slide, please, James. So in terms of next steps, we're currently setting up the content management system of the Phase 2 Keyed website so that it mirrors the information architecture previously outlined and ready to receive the content for routes 1 and 2. And so this further prepares the development site to test the content and the design with the community to ensure that it's meeting their needs. And feedback from this testing will support our iteration of both the content and the design. We're also looking at how content could be made to be more interactive. We've already started creating short videos of key stakeholders sharing their perspectives on the importance of Keyed and what this means for their organisation and the wider Welsh public sector. You may have seen the video of Liz Lucas, for example, which we published as a blog post on the current Keyed website, which I would encourage anybody to have a look at. It's fantastic. But without stealing any more of Corey's thunder, next slide, please, James, and handing over to my colleague, Corey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Warren. I'm guessing that there are no questions on that yet because I think most of it is sitting in my space. So I will let you ponder everything that Warren said and maybe put that into context. So yeah, user testing For the familiar faces out there, you've been on a long journey with us from autumn through to almost summer now, can you believe it? And I just wanted to pause and on the next slide talk about the approach that we have been taking and the approach that we are currently taking around everything user research. So when we started out on this project, we were picking up on the findings from an existing discovery, which had set out the problem statement in that there was a potential need for the procurement centre of excellence, and the alpha was to dig in and really validate whether those findings were things that we wanted to take forward and develop into services. So we were sitting in what we call the generative research space at this point, which meant we were asking the questions, are we designing the right thing? And all of the research activities that we did at this stage were to understand the problem that all of you were facing in more detail and think about how we would go about trying to solve those problems for you. So we were doing things at that point like surveys, interviews, ideation, thinking about how, best practice, procurement journeys could come to life and be relevant and applicable to folks in the Welsh public sector, no matter what size and shape of team you were operating in. And that was great. That got us to a really strong point where we had a good concept for each of the 3 services, and they were being housed in what was the phase 1 keyed website. Now, at that point, group sessions become not as useful at that stage. What we actually needed to do then was flip our mindset into what we call an evaluative research process. And that meant running one-to-one testing sessions that helped us answer this question, which is, are we designing the thing in the right way? So it allowed us to go much deeper into understanding whether the product or concept we were creating was actually solving those problems and how we could make iterative improvements. So what we've been up to on the next slide, James, please, for May, is moving away from generating ideas into evaluating the user experience, focusing our energies on the next iteration of the keyed website. And we've been doing that, as I've said, through weekly one-on-one usability testing sessions. Now, these aren't complete. We've got next week to go, and I know some of you are signed up to those sessions. So again, we haven't got all of our learnings, but in the spirit of open ways of working, we'll share what we have learned with you in a second. We've had attendees to these sessions from across the Welsh public sector and also from Welsh Government too. So we've been able to look at what we call the front stage service users, but also how that would translate to the backstage of the folks who are creating and generating content. And all the way through this process, we've been identifying opportunities for improvement, feeding that back into the team that are working on content and user experience, and talking about how we could bring these changes to life and what that would mean for a soft launch of the phase 2 site. So what I'm going to try and attempt to do now is fire up the prototype, which means wresting control away from James and into my own hands to show you some of the learnings, good, bad, and not so positive, let's say, that we can learn from, and show you where we've got to with this. So it's a bit of a sneak peek here into the prototype. Before I fire it up, 3 things really to caveat the prototype with. What we are testing is a series of wireframes. So not all of the functionality currently works. Not all of the content is in situ. There's holding content here. And as I say, it's a rough draft, really, so it's not polished, but it's given us enough of a sense of some of the key journeys through the site that we're able to get a good sample of data to make informed decisions about the design changes that we want to make. So let me press share. And hopefully you are now seeing a prototype on your screen. So in terms of what we've learned then from what we have shared, we've focused our user testing very much on what we've called the procurement journey. So you'll see that here is one of our key labels on the site. And one of the first pieces of feedback that we've picked up on is really a content or a labeling piece of feedback, in that you'll see here we talk about the procurement journey, but our main call to action is start your journey. Now, the feedback from testers has been that start your journey could mean something much broader than the specifics of procurement journey. So we're going to tweak that label to make sure that what we're actually intending the user to see is reflected in the language that we're choosing to use as the call to action. So even a small thing like that immediately changes the expectation. If I click on start your journey, then it will take us down to the key area that we've been focusing our attention on, which is the visualization of what Warren has talked through. And that is how we are developing the procurement journey from a user experience perspective. So we have all of this content. We're trying to help users who hit the site quickly navigate to the area or steps in the route that are relevant to them. And the way that we've done this is through chunking up content around what you see here on the left-hand side, develop, tender and contract. And then what you can see on the right-hand side, which is the various steps through the route. Now, the feedback on this initially is that the visualization is very simplistic, user-friendly. People can quickly see what is relevant to them depending on what part of the procurement journey they are most likely to interact with. And another piece of positive feedback has been from folks who maybe are just one person working in this space as a procurement professional, and they actually need to have a way of mitigating risk potentially around being that one person in the team who holds this knowledge. And potentially people who don't work in the procurement space but have an element of that as part of their job could come to the Keyed site, be signposted and quickly see this information. And it actually helps, if you like, to have a bit of a second brain that is supported by Keyed. So if I click through then to view develop route 1, which is the journey that we are asking people to test, again, we have a quick landing page here that dives you a little bit deeper into the steps associated with this particular route. Again, the feedback here is that this is very easy to understand. The chunking of content is positive because it quickly gets you to where you need to go. And then a bit of feedback around the more detailed content that we've included. So if you remember, those of you that have been in the user testing groups, we were talking about how we give a baseline of information to whoever would visit the Keyed site and need to understand more about the steps in the procurement journey. And that manifested itself as an introduction, but also this functionality around the 5 things you need to know. So again, we've tested this with the community. Feedback again is that it's going to be really helpful as a quick overview of each of the steps, and we'll replicate this approach now that we validated it across all steps in the procurement journey for each route. Where things get a little bit more complicated is in this piece of functionality that you see here. So one of the challenges that we were facing back in the generative stage of our research is how on earth do we make such a vast quantity of information relevant, accessible, and easy to understand for professionals wherever they sit, whatever level of experience, whichever industry, whichever policy area they're interested in. And that has manifested itself into what is a filtering tool. So what you're looking at is a tool that helps you to filter, slice and dice content and information. Now, the feedback on this has been that as a piece of functionality, the potential sitting behind this is great. It is game-changing in the sense that you can now select your media type, learning and training, toolkits, events, booking courses, apply an industry lens to it. So the example here, fleet, housing and health, and also actually apply a lens of policy on top of it, sustainability, transparency, social value, and so on. That is going to be really helpful, as what we've heard. But the bit that we need to iterate and improve on is that in this design, it's not telling you what it is. So every user that we've spoken to so far has given this a thumbs up when we've explained what the functionality is, but just on their own devices, at a quick glance, haven't really been able to orientate themselves in what this tool is offering. So that's a great learning to take away, because it's an easy fix. The more complicated fix that sits behind this is how we serve up information. So if you remember, we're sitting in the site here on a quite detailed step of the journey. We're in develop, route 1, step 1, developing a brief. The question from the community is, if you were to see the filtering tool here, would it show you information from all across the keyed site, all of the curated content, or should it in fact serve up very specific information to this step in the procurement journey? And if so, that would be replicated for each of the steps in the journey. And it's a really interesting piece of feedback that Warren and I were talking about earlier today, because in a sense, by being on this page, you as a user have already indicated your area of interest. So that's something we're going to take away, look at how we do that through tagging and technology, and just make sure that what we are serving up to users is as relevant and specific as possible based on where you are in the keyed website. The other little bit of future ideation then that we've talked about with testers is what you see here, the sign in and register functionality. Now, this isn't live yet. We've not built this functionality out, so it wouldn't appear in the next iteration. But as an extension of the keyed service, one of the things that we want to test and get feedback on is whether this piece of functionality would be useful for professionals to actually be able to create and curate their own keyed, if you like. So if you were to click on something that you had filtered in the filtering tool, like the Carbon Literacy Toolkit, would it be useful if you had an account to be able to add that to a personal learning area, so you can save the content that's relevant to you, potentially share it with your colleagues, add your own content and build up your own repository of knowledge that is very specific and applicable to where you are sitting as a procurement and commercial professional. So I'll stop sharing there. James, if you can fire up the PowerPoint again, please, and I'll tell you about what we have coming up next as we develop out the user research for the rest of this phase.
Yeah, no problem. There's a couple of questions I think just dropped into chat as well, but it might be worth.
I'll come to them. I'll take a look at them whilst you're firing those up. Okay, let me cover off the next steps and then we can come to questions, because I have a feeling that we'll all jump in on these questions that are being asked at this point. So now we are getting to the stage where we're completing the user testing one-on-one with the keyed website. We're thinking about what we do into June, and our approach here is going to be to flip back to our generative group user testing session. So we'll move back into our fortnightly testing sessions that were happening on a Wednesday afternoon. So we'll probably stick to that timing. We have a number of tools and digital products that are being created alongside the keyed service. So James mentioned our colleagues at UBDS. And these are the tools that we will be testing in upcoming sessions. So we have the pipeline planning tool, the policy mapping tool from a functionality perspective, but also from a content perspective. So there'll be a number of questions that the policy mapping tool contains, and we want to get a sense from users on what the priority is around those questions. We also want to continue to test out the future functionality for the keyed website, like, for example, the signing functionality that I mentioned, deepening the amount of content available in the filtering tool so that users can interact with it and actually start to serve up content in a way that is more like the final version of the site. So if you haven't yet been involved in the one-on-one testing and you'd like to come back to a group session, you will be able then to get a sneak peek of some of these other products that Keyed will act as the shop window for, in effect. So if you're curious and you want to find out a little bit more, now is the time to jump back into those sessions, and we'll have a forward plan for you on what we'll be testing and when we come back after the half-term break. think that's everything from me. So James, I'll hand back to you to field through those questions, and I'm sure Warren and I can jump in and cover them off depending on what area they're sitting in.
Thank you, Corey. So I think maybe you just answered one of those there in terms of key being the shop window and trying to kind of be the glue to bring all this together in one place. But Corey, Warren, do you want to mention anything further on that?
Yeah, I was just going to reply to Helen's question about, and it's not a stupid question, Helen. It's where does this fit in with the Welsh Government Procurement Route Planner, which is currently being updated? Is it a simplistic version of that? Our understanding is that this is building on the content that they've produced for that, and is potentially a replacement for that content, which I understand was published on the Welsh Government website, but may have been taken down. I will clarify that for certainty and be able to come back to the group for the next session or as part of any kind of follow-up on that. And then Alice's question on terminology, search value is being updated with the term wellbeing impacts. And there's also a new definition of this, which is this has been delivered through the Wellbeing Impacts Group. Will the keyed website and resources be aligned with this work and new approach? Absolutely. Everything that Corey's demonstrated today is, in terms of terminology, is entirely changeable, and we would absolutely make sure that it aligns with current terminology and prevailing terminology, and also make sure that we, for the longer term, we align with any associated activities in relation to that work stream as well, Alice. So thanks for flagging that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Wayne?
Hi there, thank you. I'll start with an apology, because actually halfway through Warren's presentation, I dropped out actually of the meeting, so I lost connection. So apologies for that. You may have already covered it. And also I had previously been invited to some of the test sessions, but they seem to have dropped off recently for me. So maybe I declined the series as opposed to an individual meeting. So, but I understand from what I did see of Warren's presentation was around the three routes, low, medium, and above threshold for the routes. I think the thing for me is actually about trying to influence my service areas and strategic senior managers, etc. Then I've got a better chance of doing that on the bigger stuff. And in fact, that's going to be the stuff which is going to make the biggest impact for the organization, both in terms of value or risk management, etc. Quite frankly, if it's on the smaller stuff, then the senior managers won't have the time to do that. And so I just wanted to understand where we are on that timeline for that sort of Route 3 piece. I understand that in the tender section, that actually we don't know what's going to be. Well, we're waiting until the sort of the clarity comes through in terms of sign off with the procurement bill and the other two sort of legislations. But I think importantly, the first phase in terms of that strategy development and then the contract phase, I'm not just sure why we couldn't start doing that piece of work earlier, because I don't think it is dependent on the requirements of the procurement bill. Yeah, so that's I have got another question around climate change, but hopefully that might be covered later in the session anyway. But
I can, thanks Wayne. So I can come back to you on that. I think you're absolutely right. We're not saying we can't do anything on what's currently labelled as Route 3 until we know what the future landscape is going to look like, because there's certain kind of, let's say, better practices and opportunities that exist, particularly at the pre-procurement development stage and planning, which means we can, we can still kind of describe what that would look like at any stage, any valued procurement. So, things like maximising the opportunities for engaging with the market in advance of actually going, running the procurement, the importance of gaining a deep understanding of your users and the problems you're trying to solve for them, the importance of taking a more incremental initiative design approach to developing proportionate outcomes-based requirements and evaluation criteria, and also, as I said, having honest, open and engaging and constructive conversations with the market, and also the opportunities for what can be done at that pre-procurement stage to increase transparency, set up the market for increased competition, and also to use that to stimulate potential innovation. And so another kind of key, I suppose, point in that is that by doing these steps and taking these actions at the pre-procurement stage, it maximizes opportunities to deliver greater value in contributing to positive social, economic, environmental and cultural outcomes. So, irrespective of the value, these are good practices to be embracing at that stage. So I think, that's my response to that question. If
I guess and apologies, I haven't seen the sort of the content, I guess, within those the first phase and the third phase of route 1 or route 2, etc. But all those things you just said there, Warren, is absolutely the things that actually I'm trying to do in my local authority to influence that. And looking at we're calling it the procurement route, I'm calling it the commercial life cycle, but it's those 3 phases of strategy development, tender management, contract management, and all those things about market engagement, understanding sort of options, understanding business needs, etc. I would want to do those things on the big stuff. The smaller stuff, actually, quite frankly, it's it can be a bit of a suck on limited resource and time. So it's that's where I want to target, and it may well be that we can bring across, because I think you're right. All those things you said are the things that actually I'm looking to do in terms of my authority and engagement. If I can access that via the Keyed website, brilliant. I can share that, etc. If not, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to create it myself. It's so that's I guess the crux of it is when would we see that sort of information for those phase that route 3 phases. And I can understand the tender part, but actually all those good practice things that you mentioned. There's no reason why we couldn't have that sort of content. Certainly, we don't have to wait for the bill, do we?
Exactly, and we can signpost people to say that we expect there to be, and there will indeed be, changes as a result of the bills being implemented, and as such, any associated content that directly relates to the bills will be updated accordingly. But you're right, if it's generic enough that it just represents good practice, then why wouldn't we surface that as soon as it's ready, and feeding into the testing as well to make sure it's adding value and it meets the needs of the keyed users.
So can I put a question then in terms of when could we see those things? That I think we're all probably in agreement in terms of yes, it absolutely makes sense. And I'm not trying to pin down to an actual date. I'm just getting a feel for what's the timelines that we would expect it through Keyed, and whether that then fits in my timelines in terms of the strategy changes and sort of my services improvement plan, which I've got to deliver on.
Good question, Wayne. I'm gonna look to my colleagues here, but I mean we're kind of systematically adding this content into the dev site as and when we can. So, but I suppose my question to you, Wayne, is if there's a timeline that you need to have some content available for you, then we could always kind of have a chat and understand how we can support your specific activities. If it's if you said I need something by next week, then we might say I don't know. So we can always pick that up offline, Wayne. But
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely worth having those conversations, and also at the moment we prioritised the first 2 routes because that's also where the content is available, but in terms of what's already being produced. and that's allowing us to test the development site and get feedback on that content. But I suppose, yeah, the other point is that it's not only can we signpost to other content, and there's a question in the chat about can we signpost to other events? Absolutely. So yes, we can signpost to content and events, but equally, Keyed, we would like to get to a point where it's, you know, it is community driven, and the community can create and should create content and help maintain Keyed. So if we find our timelines are misaligned and you get there first, then we'd be more than happy to put it on the site. Corey, was there
Can I just
anything
add-
further you wanted to add, or Corey?
Sorry.
Oh, just to jump in and say, I think this for me is where the testing moving back into those group sessions that weren't in diaries over the course of May, because we've had people just put their hands up for one-on-one testing sessions. So now they will be scheduled back in, and Harrod has said, Wayne, that she'll send that back to you. Everyone who was in that group will get the sessions booked in. The future iteration of the Keyed site, I mean, we're thinking about it now from a content perspective. So it may be that one of those sessions is around Route 3 and dig into the expectations from the community in a little bit more detail, because all of our focus has been on curating the content for those first two routes. We've got the feedback on that. Now it's that complex area of the journey that we know is out there, and it's waiting for us to tackle in earnest. So I would say that that's a great candidate for one of those group sessions. So thank you for raising it. I'll put it on the agenda. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I know we spoke about the Route 3 and particularly about the strategy development element, but from my position in terms of Powys County Council, particularly about improving contract management, I'm starting at the top and working my way down actually, in terms of those big ticket contracts, big complex, big impact, big risk, etc. And that gives me, I think, the strength or the influence to get people around the table. And because the failure to do that actually could have a big impact on the council. So I'm not. There will be pockets across the council, like many other public sector organisations, that there's really good things happening, but we're trying to roll out a consistent way and a collaborative way of how we do it across the council. Thank you.
I just wanted to come in on Howard's question as well, around plans to include signposting to other help for users, for example, support for Meet the Buyer events. I think that's what MTB stands for, and supply chain mapping from business wells and sell to wells. So absolutely, Howard. So what our kind of bias towards action for Keyed is a curation model rather than a creation model. We're not saying we wouldn't create content if we've identified areas where perhaps existing materials, artifacts, content isn't quite meeting the needs of users, and there's a justification for creation, then we would put forward a case for that. But this is the kind of thing where we say, well, if we know that there's a series of events planned, such as Meet the Buyer events, supply chain mapping, then that can be part of the it's part of the material that's curated and then surfaced within Keyed to support on that as well.
Thanks, Warren. Was there a question, Wayne, about sustainability that you wanted to ask? I wonder if it's worth doing that now.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, an apology from me. I kind of lost sight a bit of the work that's been going on, the good work that's been going on in Keyed. But one of the things, I think one of the sort of the strands of activity was around the commercial, was the procurement journey. There was also around climate change, I think, reporting and emissions reporting, etc. Again, apologies if I got that wrong. I've actually recently there's a group that's been created by the WLGA are sort of coordinating this, where a number of chief execs are leading on particular pieces of work. Unfortunately, my chief executive on long-term sick, so one of the executive directors has put their hand up, and and it's given the task of procurement. So he's invited me to work alongside him to support on that. So it's a climate strategy panel, and it's looking at the LGA sustainability toolkit that they've created, etc., and how that can be developed and rolled out and developed, etc., etc. But I don't want to duplicate anything. And if there's work that yourselves have started on that, then it'd be really helpful to understand that.
Thanks, Matt. That's good to know. So I think if we could pick up separately on that, but just on the that, but absolutely knowing these things are taking place is part of helping to join the dots. So just on the carbon emissions reporting piece, we have started. It's not we, but the Welsh Government, in association with a small number of local authorities, have started to talk about their kind of shared interests in helping to move away from what's currently the predominantly spend-based proxy for reporting, but with a particular focus on the social care sector, and seeing about how we might be able to engage with providers in that sector to improve the estimation of emissions. So yeah, there's work at a very early stage, but it's promising that we've got a small number of authorities who said, yeah, we want to focus on this. Bring in the expertise of Ether, who have already been involved with some of the reporting tool. But this could be a great opportunity where the work that you've just mentioned could kind of start to dovetail, or at least we, at the very least, in the early stages, we align and we can start sharing kind of lessons learned.
Absolutely.
As part of that. So
yeah.
So if we could pick up on that outside of the show and tell, that'd be really good.
I had a brief discussion. I had a meeting a couple of days ago with a number of people on there, and I think Jenny from the WLGA is going to make contact with yourselves to set up a discussion, so we have that sort of clarity on what work yourselves have been doing and what our plans are to do. So yeah, make sure we collaborate and align that, as opposed to duplicate, like I say. So brilliant. Okay, thank you.
So just one other point there, in terms of net zero is still the focus in terms of this stage of the delivery. So when we're talking about policy references, any additional guidance that we might signpost to in terms of the case studies that we're seeking, maybe in fact the training that might come on stream over the next couple of months, and even maybe the events, the focus I think is still net zero just now, just to mention that as well. Okay, how are we doing? Any other questions? So I'll move the slides on to, did you pop this one in, Corey? Maybe the most important one if you've got a phone, to scan the QR code or visit the link underneath to sign up again for the testing sessions. And we'll make sure those invites go back out in diaries. Yeah,
you can also sign up on the current Keyed website too, under events. And whilst I'm on the topic of events, although you might have been saying this next, James, but I'll say it anyway. So Keyed Rani, which is our webinar series, just a bit of an update on what's happening there. So we are having our face-to-face event, which was scheduled for early summer. That's going to be moved out to September now, because we are trying to get as many people lined up as possible and give people enough lead time to get that in their diaries. So that's been moved out, but we will have an online event happening on the 15th of June. So again, you can find out more about that on the Keyed site when we upload it, sign up to it, and get that in your diaries too if you'd like to join us for that.
Great. Okay, so any other questions? Well, thank you very much. I think you've got our contact details on the Keyed website, but we'll also pop them in chat if you want to have a discussion before any of the next set of events. Sorry, I should have maybe asked if UDBS wanted to mention anything as well.
Yeah, if that's okay. Cassio, you're right to just give an introduction. So just a quick introduction into what the kind of policy mapping tools all around. I'll hand over to yourself, and then I'll go into kind of why we've kind of joined the forum for the week. Oh, you're on mute, Katia.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all good. Cheers.
Usually just by moving my mic, I can get off mute, but not today. So essentially the policy mapping tool is designed to help public sector buyers identify and manage the sustainability risks and opportunities linked to whatever is being procured. And this is also to be aligned with the sustainability development principles in the Well-Being of Future Generations Act. So we're building a tool on something called Microsoft Power Pages, which is an external facing web page. And we're building kind of a structure that is adaptable with different question sets and different stages. And as I think Corey mentioned earlier, we'll be working with you guys to discuss the content as well as just the whole feel of the tool and the functionality.
Yeah. No, thanks, Cassie. Yeah, we'll be kind of joining the testing forums that with Corey from now on, and we can kind of go through take everyone through the tool in a bit more kind of lower level detail around what we're trying to achieve and things, and also kind of the different elements we'd like to use the forum to test and gain feedback on as well if possible. But yeah, we just kind of joined this as kind of just to provide a very quick introduction, and that we will be joining the kind of testing sessions moving forward.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everyone, and yeah, look forward to catching up again soon.